On the one hand, it's a very, very good thing that the United States has the power and the reach to monitor and seize drug dealers and bad guys, even if those bad guys happen also to have a side hustle as the president of a sovereign country. On the other hand, it could prove in the long run to be a bad thing that any power seizes the president of any other power, even if that president is also a drug dealer. And this is a net calculation that we will not know the full effects of as people who watch, monitor the situation, as the phrase goes, and watch history in real time, probably for another 20 years. And that is another way of saying that maybe other powers elsewhere in the world will decide to follow this example. That said, they don't quite have the capability we did. And I'm very heartened to see that the United States can still pull this kind of thing off.
We can pull it off, but then what happens? You heard the president talk about how we'll run Venezuela, and the new president, Delcy Rodriguez, the acting president who's been sworn in, would work alongside the U.S. What does that mean from where you sit, that the U.S. will run Venezuela?
I think it matters more what it means from where the Venezuelans sit. And it could be that the remnants of the Maduro regime do, in fact, comply, seeing as they're facing the barrel of a gun. It might be that they get on board. And let's not forget that Maduro himself offered some kind of deal on the oil industry, on the energy industry. But on the other hand, we don't know what run Venezuela means. It could be that Venezuela ends up in some kind of further or extended civil collapse. The economy has lost about 3/4 of its GDP in recent years. Its total energy production has been down annualized 8% for between 2011 and 2021. So it's already more or less on its knees. And I would suggest that we're at something of a fork in the road. Yeah.
What do you think next steps are likely to be here in Venezuela? Because I guess what we all want to avoid is something where the U.S. and its resources really need to get involved here. How do you think this might play out?
Well, again, as I say, this is a widespread. My money would be on the Venezuelans getting in line broadly. The United States has demonstrated an incredible capability. And part of the reason that we had our fleet there for so long, I imagine, was to get people to think in Venezuela about whether or not they actually wanted us to put boots on the ground or continue with a second wave military strike. And I would add in as well that it's important to look at what Venezuelans think. And Venezuelans around the world and also in Venezuela do seem to be very pleased that Maduro is gone. Maduro was and is a bad guy. We're going to find out just how bad at noon and in the coming weeks, no doubt. So I think the Venezuelans will probably welcome this liberation, if you like, albeit there are elements within Venezuela and within Colombia, and of course within Cuba and Russia, that would probably want to see something else go down.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Russia, but in the context of whether this ousting gives Putin the green light to renew efforts to topple Vladimir Zelensky, whether China can push forward with removing Taiwan's president.
So this is the multi-billion-dollar question, I think. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has put forward the proposition that the United States has the right to break international law if it is enforcing its domestic law. And that's another way of saying that the United States has long looked at international law askew, because, of course, the United States is based on its constitutional law and cannot supersede constitutional law. So we will do what we want to do in the world. And as I say, Maduro is and was a bad guy. So I think in the short term, it's a good thing that we did it. Putin has tried to assassinate Zelensky more than once. And I'm sure there are a few officials in Taiwan that the Chinese would like to get their hands on. And we could well have let the genie out of the bottle, to your good question, on this kidnapping of foreign leaders as a new norm. I mean, the caveat, again, is that the United States can do it. We just rolled over Chinese air defense systems, and we have the best intelligence and military in the world. So whether other countries can do it is an open question, but I think you're right to suggest that they may try.
How worried should Cuba be? Should Greenland be? Colombia today?
Well, I mean, my eyes are on Greenland. I've always said to you guys that I think the president is serious in his foreign policy declarations, and there is a strategic sense, in some way, a strategic rationale for the United States controlling Greenland, because of the president rightly points out there are Russian and Chinese incursions in that area, and it's going to get more and more as climate change continues. I think Mexico should probably have a think about how many cartel members it's harboring. And as for Cuba, again, we've long had a relationship that is adversarial with Cuba. and I wouldn't myself be opposed to a similar operation there. But of course, you have to then, as you've pointed out in these questions, start to wonder about what kind of international environment you're introducing.